بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم والحمد لله رب العالمين والعاقبة للمتقين أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له ولي الأولين والآخرين وأشهد أن محمدًا عبده ورسوله وصفيه وخليله صلوات الله وسلامه عليه وعلى آله وأصحابه أجمعين أما بعد. Before beginning the lesson, the brothers who are sitting in the back and against the walls, please come forward. And today is the 8th lesson in explaining Ahkamul Janaiz, the rulings relating to funerals. And in the previous lesson, we spoke about two matters, An-Na'yu wal-Ta'ziyah. And An-Na'i, what's the meaning of An-Na'i? Who knows the intent or the meaning of An-Na'i? Who was here last week? Announcing deaths. Announcing deaths. And we said that the ruling of An-Na'i, or announcing deaths, is three. Sometimes it is wajib, sometimes it is permitted or it is encouraged, and other times it is haram. As for when it is wajib, when nobody is found to pray the janazah over the deceased or to take care of the funeral procession. And because the ruling of the janazah is fardu kifaya, if there's nobody there to do it, then it has to be publicized and the death has to be announced, so people come forward to pray the janazah and take care of the deceased. So here it is wajib. And also it can be jaiz, mubah, meaning permitted, or it can be mustahab, something which is recommended. And that is when the intention behind it is to encourage people to pray salah and to make istighfar for the deceased, and also if there are any rights which need to be returned. And this is taken from the hadith of Abu Hurairah radiallahu anhu, which we mentioned in the previous lesson, when the woman passed away and she was buried at night, and after a few days the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam noticed that she was not in the masjid. He said sallallahu alaihi wasallam, "Afala kuntum adhantumuni bih." If only you had informed me regarding her death, so he could also pray the janazah. And then finally, An-Na'i can be haram, and that is the Na'i of Al-Jahiliyyah. And that is that during the times of Jahiliyyah, they would raise their voices in announcing the death of people, and they would go to extremes with regarding when mentioning or praising a person. And sometimes there would be a rider, and he would ride around the town and to the houses announcing the death of the person. Or sometimes they'd have a person who announces the deaths at the marketplaces, etc. So this is when it is haram. Then the second matter we spoke about is at-ta'ziyah. And what is the Arabic word for at-ta'ziyah, or the meaning of ta'ziyah in Arabic? At-tasliyah. And at-tasliyah, it means to bring comfort to the family of the deceased. To the family of the deceased, or any affliction. So it's not restricted to death, but it's often used when it comes to death. So at-ta'ziyah, it is bringing comfort to the family of the deceased and strengthening the family of the deceased and making dua for them and dua for the one who has passed away. And also when it comes to ta'ziyah, then the base ruling is that it is something which is mubah, something which is permitted, or something which is encouraged. Encouraged because at-ta'ziyah, it covers all of those ahadith regarding being good to other Muslims and loving for your brother what you love for yourself, etc. And we mentioned some of the evidences in the previous lesson. Also, it is permitted for a Muslim to go give condolences or words of comfort or ta'ziyah to the family of a deceased non-Muslim. Any family who are kuffar and one of their relatives who is a kafir died as a kafir, it's permitted for a person to go to their house and to give condolences or words of comfort to them, especially if this is going to be an avenue of ad-da'wah. And what's the evidence for this? Now, what's the evidence for this? Now, the hadith of Al-Ghulam Al-Yahudi, when the Messenger sallallahu alayhi wasallam visited the Jewish boy and he was ill, very close to his illness. So they said, just as it is permitted to visit, as the Prophet did, the Jewish boy and he was in his illness, then similarly his family after the person has passed away. And also we mentioned that from the rulings of At-Ta'ziyah, that it is not restricted to any one place or any one time or any particular means or any wording. So a person can use the du'as of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, lillahi ma akhadh wa lahu ma a'ta wa kullu shay'in 'inda Allahi ajalun musamma, etc., or any words in any language through any means, even if it's a phone call, even if it's a text message, in any place, whether you see him on the street as he was walking, or you meet him in the masjid, or for example at workplace, at school or college, all of this comes under a ta'ziyah. And also we mentioned there is no time for ta'ziyah. So we do not specify the first 3 days for a ta'ziyah. We do not specify the first 3 days for ta'ziyah, rather whenever that person is seen, until the person finds comfort. Until the person finds comfort. And then we spoke about some of the innovations relating to a ta'ziyah. First of them is what is known as al-ma'tam. And this is people gathering whenever there is any form of calamity for the sake of gathering. Especially on the 3rd day, the 7th day, the 40th day, every month. And then what they have, the urs. And urs is like an annual death anniversary. And also these khatams, when people gather periodically and they give out food and they make dhikr, etc. Also coming together in order to recite Quran, or hiring a qari to recite Quran, or dividing the Quran between people. Everybody recites half a juz. Or for example, having a utensil and everybody reads dhikr and then they throw the date stone into the pot or the utensil. This is what is being done nowadays. So all of this is a bid'ah or something which is not legislated. And then the last matter we spoke about is al-ijtima'u lit-ta'ziyah. People gathering for condolences, or a person sitting and specifying a place to receive condolences. Like a person says, whoever wants to offer condolences, then you can come into my house and I will sit at my house and I will receive condolences. And we mentioned that in terms of receiving condolences, there is an aspect of it which is permitted, and this is agreed upon by the ulama. And then there's another aspect which is haram, and this is also bil ittifaq. And then there is a situation which there is a difference of view amongst the ulama. So that which is permitted is for a person to receive condolences without any tartib, and without specifying or organizing a place, even if there's a gathering which takes place. For example, a person came to pray Salatul Dhuhr, and coincidentally 4 or 5 people came and gave him ta'ziyah, and they sat for a few moments. Or somebody was at home and they heard of his calamity, so they went and they knocked on his door, they entered, they sat down and they offered him condolences. So if it is done without any type of tarteem, any type of organizing, any type of announcing, advertising, specifying a particular place, and it is done coincidentally, wherever it is. It could be in a park, could be in the masjid, it could be at the house of the deceased or the house of one of the relatives, then this is permitted without any difference of opinion. That which is haram, ittifaqan, is when the gatherings contain the bid'ah, which we have mentioned. Khatam, urs, sab'inat, arba'inat, 40 nights, 70 nights, every year, etc. Then it becomes haram. And also, like the hadith of Jarir ibn Abdul al-Bajri, radiyallahu an, sahahu al-Albani, he said, كُنَّا نَعُدُّ الْإِجْتِمَاعِ إِلَى أَهْلِ الْمَيِّتِ وَصُنْعِ الطَّعَامِ بَعْدَ دَفْنِهِ مِنَ النِّيَاحَةِ. That we, meaning the Sahaba, we used to consider gatherings with the family of the deceased and then preparing food. We used to consider this from an-niyaha. And an-niyaha is from the traits of jahiliyyah. The issue which is differed over, we said a person specifying a place, whether it's a hall or whether it's a person's house, and then advertising it to receive condolences. That whoever wants to give condolences, then come to this house during these times, for example, or come to this hall during these times. This is what there is some difference of opinion over. So, the view of the majority of the ulama and the fuqaha, and amongst them the Shafi'iyya, the Malikiyya, and a riwayah with the Hanabila, and this is also the view of An-Nawawi and many of the contemporary ulama, the majority of them, amongst them Ibn Uthaymeen and Al-Albani and Al-Fawzan, is that it is not permitted for a person to specify a place to receive condolences. If it happens as a coincidence or without advertising, without dedicating a place, then it is permitted. As for specifying and advertising a place, then this is not correct. In fact, Shaykh Ibn Uthaymeen rahimahullah, he goes one step further, and he mentioned that this was not the way of the Salaf, and rather a person should close his door. And whoever wants to give a person ta'ziyah can give a person ta'ziyah in the masjid or in the marketplace, wherever he meets him. Of course, we have the hadith of Aisha radiallahu anha, that whenever one of her family members would pass away, the women would go to the house of the deceased, and they would sit for a little while, and then the women would leave, and the only ones who would remain are her close family members and her inner circle. And again, this is something without tartib. As a coincidence, you go visit that person and give that person ta'ziyah. Then the second view, and this is the madhab of the Ahnaf, and also the view of Shaykh Ibn Baz, that it's permitted to sit to receive condolences. And they said that because this is firstly an avenue towards condolences, and secondly because of the large growth of the community. And I mentioned various points. Firstly, the obligation whenever the ulama differ is not to say, but the ulama differ over it. Because the ulama, the fuqaha, they differ over many things. Rather, our obligation is فَإِن تَنَازَعْتُمْ فِي شَيْءٍ فَرُدُّوهِ إِلَى اللَّهِ وَالرَّسُولِ إِن كُنتُمْ تُؤْمِنُونَ بِاللَّهِ وَالْيَوْمِ الْآخِرِ. If you differ over anything, then take it back to Allah and the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam, if you truly have iman in Allah and the final day. Secondly, even those ulama who permitted sitting in order to receive condolences, it was not like what is common in our time today, meaning gathering for the sake of gathering and sitting for an hour or 2 hours, and then there is all sorts of speech, and there is actually no ta'ziyah which is happening. Rather, the correct sunnah is that even if, for example, a person has specified his house, you go and you give ta'ziyah and you stay a few minutes, then you leave. As for what we're seeing today in many of these places, then this isn't even called a ta'ziyah. Secondly, or thirdly, we don't know of a single alim who permitted the taking of masajid to be places of receiving a ta'ziyah. The majority of them spoke about the house, but as for the masajid specifically, the masajid were not built as community centers to receive ta'ziyah and as places of social gathering. So, and this was not done during the time of the Salaf. So this is closer to being a bid'ah. And then the fourth point is that often, now these gatherings, now they even have names. So they will call them Fatiha, and they will call them Puri, etc. So now it's becoming an event or a gathering for the sake of a gathering. And therefore I mentioned that the best way is for us to teach the people what is ta'ziyah and how to give a ta'ziyah. And that ta'ziyah can be given before the salah, or after the salah in the masjid, or before the burial, or after the burial, and that the family shouldn't be burdened with tens or hundreds of people traveling from all over the UK in order to come and sit with that person for hours. And of course, we're not saying that a person should stay at home and nobody should be visiting anybody. We said that if it is without any type of tartib, then it's permitted. That you visit each other, and wherever you see that person, you give a ta'ziyah. That's the first point. Secondly, of course, when it comes to the close relatives, i.e. brothers, sisters, etc., of course they're going to visit each other, and they're going to gather at the house. And this they are going to do even if there is no place which has been specified, because all of them have been afflicted with the death of the father or the mother, etc. The third point is that when we say that it is burdensome and the family should not be burdened, on one side, people will say that, look, our houses are too small and it's too burdensome for us to cater for X amount of people. And then on the other side, but there's no burden in it. And therefore, we have to now use the masajid or the masajid rooms and facilities. So it's either one or the other. If it's not burdensome and it's easy, then accommodate them at home if you need to do so. Otherwise, to say it's burdensome, then we should advise the people that it's better, this is ta'ziyah and this is how it's done, and there should be no burdening. Otherwise, at the masjid and at the salat al-janazah or at the dafan, it can be done. And I also mentioned how ironic it is that at the salatul janazah, they will have given ta'ziyah to the family of the deceased, and then they are told, by the way, we have a place, come and give ta'ziyah at this place, and then it's advertised. So actually, when they saw that person at the janazah or at the burial, at the salah, for example, they gave that person ta'ziyah. And we mentioned the view of the fuqaha, the madhahib, is that the ta'ziyah is not something which is to be repeated. Otherwise, all you are doing is renewing the grief and the worry of that person. So the ta'ziyah is given. That person gave the ta'ziyah in the masjid or at the burial and said words of comfort, and then a place is advertised, please come again, and we're going to sit over there. And subhanallah, there's something I'd like to mention, and this is something which was heard in a particular masjid. I won't mention the name of the masjid. That there was a particular person, and somebody had passed away in his family, and his guests are not actually that large in number. The person's guests are not actually that large in number. So the person asked in terms of doing ta'ziyah in the masjid, doing ta'ziyah in the masjid. And they said to him, look, why don't you just do ta'ziyah at home? Why don't you receive people at home? Why the masjid? And his reply was, obviously in Urdu, his reply was, oh, in the houses people make a mess. Do you understand the severity of what he said? In the houses people make a mess. It's easier for them to be in the masjid. Meaning it's not okay for people to make a mess in your house, but in the house of Allah they can make a mess. So these are some of the dangers of these issues. So it's better that we teach the people and we give them the correct tarbiyah and we teach them how to give a ta'ziyah. Otherwise, we are facilitating this issue and it is only getting worse. Al-Muhim, more details were mentioned in the previous lesson. As for today's lesson, then we are going to cover the issue of ghusl al-mayyit or taghsil al-mayyit, washing the body of the deceased. So firstly, what is the hukam? What is the shar'i ruling of washing the body of the deceased? We said fardu kifaya. Like everything regarding the janazah, it is fardu kifaya. So a group of Muslims have to fulfill the responsibility of washing the body of the deceased. If nobody comes forward to volunteer in washing the body of the deceased, then every person in that community is sinning until a group of people come forward to wash the body of the deceased. And it is wajib, fardu kifaya, to wash the body of the deceased and to not delay in washing the body of the deceased. Why not delay? Because of the general hadith we mentioned previously, the hadith of Abu Hurairah radiyallahu an, asri'u bil janazah. The Messenger sallallahu alayhi wasallam said, hasten with the janazah. And the meaning of asri'u bil janazah is not only the salah, but everything connected to the janazah. So there should be no unnecessary delay when it comes to, from the time the person has passed away to the time the person has been buried, there should be no unnecessary delay. In terms of why is it an obligation? Because firstly, this is honoring the Muslim. And a Muslim has to be honored in this life, when he is alive, and after he has passed away. And secondly, due to the various ahadith in which the Prophet ﷺ ordered the deceased to be washed. Like the hadith of Ibn Abbaas, radiyallahu anhuma, we mentioned it previously, when that man, he was on his riding beast, his camel, and he fell down or he was hit and he passed away. And this was at Arafah, and he was standing near the Prophet ﷺ. Then he said, sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, اغسلوه بماء وسدر. Wash him with water and sidr. So the fact that the Prophet ﷺ ordered the people to wash him shows that it is wajib or fardu kifaya. And various hadith, some of which will come, in which the Prophet ﷺ taught how to wash the body of the deceased. All of this shows that it is fardu kifaya. Of course, there are exceptions to this obligation. So the first exception is the shaheed, the one who dies as a martyr. And when we say shaheed, we are referring to shaheedul ma'raka, the one who dies a martyr on the battlefield. As for the other shuhada who we spoke about, like al-ghariq, the one who drowned, sahibul hadam, the one who died due to a building collapsing on that person, and the woman who died due to childbirth, and the one who died due to an illness in the stomach, etc. Those are shuhada in terms of the akhirah, but when it comes to the ahkam of the dunya, then they are not treated like the shaheed of the battle. So when it comes to the janaza and everything relating to the janaza, when we say shaheed, we're talking about shaheedul ma'raka only. Also, when it comes to a baby or the fetus in the womb of the mother, and it is born as a stillbirth, meaning it comes out either dead or it comes out and it dies moments after it has come out. So there's different rulings. Firstly, if the baby is born wastahalla, and the meaning of istahalla is there is an independent life in the baby even for a moment of time, meaning the baby takes a breath or two breaths, or for a few moments it is alive, then the ghusl is wajib, because it is a Muslim human like any other human. Secondly, it is recommended, mustahab, without it being wajib, but it is mustahab to give a ghusl to a miscarriage, or if it came out and it was already dead, or it was in the fetus or the womb of the mother, and it was after 4 months. It was after 4 months. And this is because after 4 months or 120 days, the ruh is blown into the fetus in the womb, as is in the hadith of Abdullah ibn Mas'ud radiyallahu anhu. And after the ruh is blown into the fetus, then it is considered to be a human. And therefore, if it passes away after 4 months or 120 days, then all of the rulings with regards to aqiqah and giving the baby a name and al-ghusl, then all of this is mustahab. Mustahab but not wajib. Mustahab but not wajib. It is wajib if the baby is born and it has independent life even for a moment of time. And as for the baby dying in the womb of its mother before 4 months, then the ghusl is not given, because the ruh was not blown into it, and therefore we don't consider it to be insan. And as is described in the various ayat and the hadith, it is tissue. It is tissue which is forming, but the ruh was not blown into it. And as for the muhrim was the one who was in a state of ihram for hajj or umrah, then the ghusl is given. The ghusl is given, but the body is not perfumed, and the one who passed away is shrouded in the two cloths or two other cloths. Basically, an ihram, whether it's their own ihram or another ihram, and the face remains uncovered. And the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam, when that man passed away at Arafah, he said, اغسلوه بماء وسدر وكفنوه في ثوبين. Wash him in water and sidr, and shroud him in two cloths, meaning an ihram. ولا تمسه طيبا, and do not perfume the body. ولا تخمروا رأسه, and do not cover the face of the head. فإن الله يبعثه يوم القيامة ملبيا, because Allah will raise him and resurrect him on يوم القيامة in a state of giving the talbiyah. Also, it's important to mention that the washing of the body of the deceased is from the rights of a Muslim towards another Muslim, and therefore the kafir is not washed by a Muslim, because al-ghusl is a way of honoring the body of the deceased, and honor in the hereafter is for the Muslims. So just as the kafir is not prayed over, salatul janazah, then similarly the kafir is not washed nor shrouded by the Muslims. However, if there is nobody to bury the body of a kafir, then the Muslims can bury the body of a kafir without al-ghusl and without any form of salah. Of course, it's not permitted for a person to mutilate the body of a Muslim or a non-Muslim. Now, this of course is not permitted, even during times of war. Also, a kafir is not permitted to wash the body of a Muslim. Only Muslims wash the body of the Muslims. And this is because ghaslul mayyit, washing the body of the deceased, is a form of ibadah. And ibadah is not accepted from the kafir. However, it is permitted for a kafir to be present when the Muslims are washing the body of the deceased for a particular reason. So let's say, for example, if it was a close relative, a father who was a non-Muslim and the child was a Muslim and the child passed away. As long as the Muslims are the ones who are washing, or for any medical reason or any legal reason that needed to happen for whatever reason, then it would be permitted. And after this, how many people wash the body of the deceased? And the answer is that there is no number, but it is, what is fardu kifaya? لو قام به من يكفي سقط عن باقين. Fardu kifaya is that type of obligation that if there are a sufficient number of people who fulfill the obligation, then the burden is removed from the rest. And therefore, how many people wash the body of the deceased? The minimum amount of people who are sufficient. So that might be 3 in some cases, 4 in some cases. Sometimes, a body may be heavier or bigger than the others. You might require 5 or 6. Or for example, if it's women washing a woman, and therefore more women are required. So it is the minimum amount who are required and sufficient to wash the body of the deceased. As for others being present, and there is no need for them to be present, or they are not required to wash the body of the deceased, then this is something which is incorrect and unbefitting. And this is for a number of reasons. Firstly, this is بِاتِّفَاقِ الْمَذَاهِبِ. All the madhahib have this view. And secondly, because they said, يُكْرَهُ النَّظَرُ إِلَى الْمَيِّتِ إِلَّا لِلْحَاجَةِ, that it is disliked for a person to look at or expose the body of the deceased unless there is a need to do so. And of course, when the body is being washed, then the body is exposed to the people. So this isn't a show or where people can come and just sit and watch. Rather, the minimum amount of people who are sufficient. And then who has a right to wash the body of the deceased? Who has the right to wash the body of the deceased? If it is a man who passed away, then those who have a right are firstly the people who are mentioned in his wasiyyah. Meaning, if the deceased instructed in his will that I want so and so and so and so to wash my body, then they are more deserving of washing his body. And the wasiyyah is to be carried out as long as it does not contain any sin or any haram. And of course, there may be a reason why the deceased has instructed for so and so to carry out the washing of his body, even though they may not be relatives, and he knows the reason. Maybe, for example, he has a disfigurement somewhere in his body that some of his close relatives do not know of, and he did not want them to know, or any other reason. So the point is that those who are first deserving of washing his body are those who he instructed in his wasiyah. And then after this, his father, and then after this, his grandfather, because in the Sharia, the grandfather takes the ruling of the father. Then after this, his son, and then after this, al-aqrab fal-aqrab min rahimihi, those who are closest to him in terms of male relatives. And the same when it comes to the woman. To the woman, what we said regarding the man, the same applies to the woman. And also it is permitted for the husband to wash his wife and for the wife to wash her husband. This is permitted. And this is due to the hadith of Aisha radiallahu anha. When it came to the washing of the body of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, she said, لو استقبلت من أمري ما استدبرت ما غسله إلا نساؤه. That if I could go back in time and make that choice again, only his wives would wash his body. So therefore it's permitted for the man to wash the body of his wife and vice versa. And then the ulama, they mention a point that let's say there's a woman and she passes away amongst men, and not mahram, ajnabi. All the men are not related to her. Or the opposite, a man, and he passes away amongst women. And all of the women are ajnabiyah to him, not mahram to him. And there are no men to be found to wash him, and there are no women found to wash her. They said in this situation, the body is not washed, rather tayammum is done. And they said that this is similar to water not being found, that there is nobody found whom it is halal to touch the body and look at the body, and therefore tayammum is done. And similarly, if water cannot be found, then tayammum is done. If water cannot be found, then tayammum is done. Similar to this, if washing the body of the deceased is dangerous for those who are washing it. Like for example, if it was some type of contagious disease, then the fuqaha mentioned that tayammum is done without the washing of the body due to the danger on those who are washing. Now, the final issue was what happened during COVID, and that was that the body was wrapped up, obviously, in the shroud, and then it was contained within a bag it was wrapped and it was zipped, and often it was leather or something which is not waterproof, and it was not permitted for that zip to be opened. And there were people who were making tayammum on the bag, and this was the practice of some of the masajid. And wallahu a'lam, that in that situation neither is tayammum done nor is washing of the body done with water, because tayammum is tayammum of the body, not tayammum of the bag. And if you're going to make tayammum of the bag, then you may as well make a ghusl of the bag. Now, if it's permitted to make tayammum of the bag, then make a ghusl of the bag. So in both cases, the body is buried, and if it's wrapped up and closed in that bag or that container, and it's not permitted to open it without tayammum and without ghusl, perhaps with a niyyah only. And this, subhanAllah, is similar to an issue some of the fuqaha mention in at-tahara. They say, let's say if there's a person and he cannot make wudu, neither can he make tayammum, meaning there's no water and neither is there any type of natural soil or sand or dust or anything like that. And they said, how could this be? And then the fuqaha gave hypothetical scenarios. They said, let's say if this person was suspended in the air, and now he's suspended in the air, there's no water and there's nothing for tayammum. Or something closer, if a person is paralyzed. It can happen, a person is paralyzed, and therefore he cannot reach water, neither can he reach any form of tayammum. What does he do? So they said that he makes the niyyah for tayammum, and he makes a tayammum. And the fuqaha replied, if he's going to make a niyyah for tayammum, then why doesn't he make a niyyah for wudu? If it's just a niyyah. So in any case, nothing is upon that person. And then in another issue is with regards to the niyyah, the intention of those who are giving the ghusl. The intention of those who are giving the ghusl. And I quote from Imam Al-Albani rahimahullah in his book Ahkam al-Janaiz. He said, أن يبتغي بذلك وجه الله. That those who are washing the body of the deceased, they should seek the face of Allah in that action which they are doing. They should seek the pleasure and the reward of Allah in that action which they are doing. لا يريد به جزاء ولا شكورا. And that person does not desire any reward or any form of gratitude. ولا شيئا من أمور الدنيا. And no reward from the dunya. And this is because of the various evidences that Allah subhanahu لا يقبل من العبادات إلا ما كان خالصا لوجهه الكريم. Those evidences which show us that Allah subhanahu does not accept any form of ibadah unless it is sincerely and purely for His sake only. And also we can add to this that your second intention should be that you are fulfilling the right of your Muslim brother. You are fulfilling and honoring your Muslim brother. And then the third intention should be that you are fulfilling the fardu kifaya. And by you filling the fardu kifaya, you are removing the burden from all the other Muslims. Because had you not done it, then the burden is on the shoulders of the Muslims and the sin is upon them. So these are the three intentions that a person should bear in mind. There is also one issue, and that is it permitted for a charge or a fee or a wage or some form of compensation to be taken for the washing of the body? We do it for the sake of Allah, but is it permitted to take a wage or compensation or some form of fee for the washing of the body of the deceased? And the view of the fuqaha and the madhahib al-arba', the jumhur amongst them, and also Shaykh ibn Abbas from the contemporary ulama, is that this is something which is permitted. And this is no different to the one who is providing the shroud from selling the shroud, or the one who is driving the car to transport the body for charging for that service. So like nowadays, for example, we have undertaker services, and the undertaker takes care of the transporting of the body, the washing of the deceased, and the burial, and there's a fee or charge behind this, then it is something which is permitted. Also, they said that as a general principle, when it comes to righteous actions, when it is something of which the benefit is muta'addi, meaning the benefit is not restricted to me, but I am benefiting others through this action, then it's permitted to take a wage or some form of compensation. Now, I'm like, for example, taking people on Hajj, or teaching somebody Quran, or and teaching something, or in this case washing the body of the deceased. Why? Because an-naf' muta'addin lil ghayr, because you are benefiting others through your services. But at the same time, you make your intention for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So this wage or this fee which is being taken is compensation for the costs or for the time, but your actions are for the sake of Allah. And wallahu a'lam, but in an Islamic country or Muslim state, then something from Baytul Mal would be given to the teacher of the Quran, or the one who is collecting zakah, or the one who is washing the body of the deceased. This would be covered by Baytul Mal. But when Baytul Mal is not there, then this is why we have these forms of compensation and fees and charges, etc. But you make your niyyah for the sake of Allah Jalla Sha'nuhu. We'll stop there, because in terms of how to wash the body of the deceased and some of the adab of washing the bodies of the deceased, there's not enough time to cover it in this lesson. So that we will leave to the next lesson. هذا والله أعلم وصلى الله على نبينا وسلم. If there's any questions you have regarding the lesson, you're welcome to ask your questions. تفضل. So firstly, man awsa bihi al-mayyit, the one who the deceased requested or instructed in his wasiyah. Secondly, his father, then his grandfather, then his sons. And subhanAllah, the reason why they differentiated between the father and the sons, yani why the father first and even the sons second, they said, subhanAllah, that the mercy of the father towards his sons is more than the mercy of the sons towards their father. Naam. And then the grandfather, because in the Sharia, the grandfather takes the place of the father. They said, al-abbu wal-jaddu wa in alaw, meaning the father or the grandfather or the great-grandfather wa in alaw. Naam. And then after that, those who are closest to him in terms of relations, in terms of rahim. Naam. And then the same for the females. They permitted that for the wife and the husband. Now, also, if it was a young boy or if it was a young girl, and when they say young girl, they said a girl la tashtahiha al-anfus, that a man is not normally attracted to. Any 3-year-old, 4-year-old, 5-year-old, somebody very young, then it's permitted. No. Now, what's wajib is for the body to be washed. That's wajib. The body has to be washed. But when the fuqaha speak about it, they said, man awla bi ghuslihi, who is more deserving of washing the body of the deceased? Who's more deserving? Otherwise, the wajib is that the body is washed. تفضل. With regards to ta'ziyah, yeah. When they say mubah, wallahu a'lam, they intend by it mustahab. They intended by it that it is something which is encouraged. Why? Because if we say mustahab, then what we're saying is that every single Muslim, it is mustahab upon them. So when they say mubah, meaning it's mubah for the Muslims in general, but it's closer to being mustahab because of the various other ahadith with regards to giving a ta'ziyah. Secondly, we also differentiate between acts of ta'ah and acts of ibadah. And bid'ah comes under both of them. So ibadah is what we translate like a ritual of worship. So for example, we say Salat al-Dhuhr ibadah, Zakat ibadah, Ramadan ibadah, fasting on Yawm Arafah ibadah. Then there are actions which are ta'at. We don't necessarily call them ibadah, and they are good actions or righteous actions, even though we don't call them ibadah. For example, the Messenger spoke about talqul wajh, smiling at the face of your brother. We don't necessarily call this ibadah. We don't say, I'm doing ibadah, I'm smiling at people. But we call this ta'ah, and it's an act of goodness, it's an act of obedience, without necessarily saying it is ibadah. Ibn Shaykh Hussain Taymiyyah, rahimahullah, he differentiates between ibadat and ta'at. So, is it ibadah like Salat al-Dhuhr is ibadah? No. But it is ta'ah? Yes, it is ta'ah. And bid'ah comes into both. Naam. And طبعا, also, some of the, when it comes to classifying something as a bid'ah, the ulama are very careful to say something which is a bid'ah. Often they'll say something like la yambaghi, it's not befitting. Khilafi awla, it's better not to. Sometimes they say khilaf sunnah and they don't call it bid'ah. They might say that this is not against the sunnah, not necessarily like opposing the sunnah in terms of it being bid'ah or haram, meaning this isn't the sunnah. But they don't mean by this, therefore it is necessarily a bid'ah. Naam. And sometimes things are makruh without them being haram. So with regards to ta'ziyah, I said there are bid'ah which are done within ta'ziyah. like Fatiha, like, the throwing of the stones, like khatams, urs, 3 day, 5 day, 7 day, 1 month. These are bid'ah which are done within the ta'ziyah. As for al-ijtima', gathering and specifying place and dedicating a place, I said ikhtalaf al-ulama. The ulama differed. But the manhaj of Ahlul Sunnati wal Jama'ah is that we don't rely upon the ulama differed. Because if you say, well, the ulama differed, therefore it's okay, the reality is the ulama differ about, the fuqaha differ about everything, almost every far'i issue, there's some ikhtilaf. So our obligation is we try our best to arrive at that which is the truth, looking at the evidences and the ayah which I mentioned, Surah An-Nisa, فَإِن تَنَازَعْتُمْ فِي شَيْءٍ فَرُدُّوهُ إِلَى اللَّهِ وَالرَّسُولِ. Even if he was in a state of janaba, there's nothing preventing him with giving ghusl. Meaning, wudu or tahara or ghusl is not a condition of giving ghusl to another. Naam. The only thing that we find is that it is mustahab for a person after having given the ghusl to perform ghusl. And even that's only mustahab. It's not wajib. Naam. That's from the hadith of Abu Hurairah radiallahu anh, Man ghassala mayyitan falyaghtasil. Whoever washes the body of the deceased, let him perform al-ghusl. And Ibn Umar said that we used to wash the body of the deceased, فَمِنَّا مَنْ يَغْتَسِلْ وَمِنَّا مَنْ لَمْ يَغْتَسِلْ. And some of us would then go perform ghusl, others would not perform ghusl. So it is something which is mustahab. But you don't have to be in wudu, or even if you're in janaba, you can give ghusl to the deceased. Why? Because the Messenger said, إِنَّ الْمُؤْمِنَ لَا يَنْجُسْ. A believer does not become impure. Just because you're in a state of janaba, it doesn't mean you're najas. إِنَّمَا الْمُشْرِكُونَ najas. The mushrikuna najas mean the najasa of ash-shirk. The body of a believer does not become najas, even if he's in a state of janaba. And this is why, or hadath, when you break the wudu. And this is why when they define hadath, when they define what we call breaking the wudu, they said, حُكْمٌ مَعْنَوِيٌّ تَمْنَعُ الصَّلَاةِ. That hadath is a symbolic state. It's not hukmun hissi, it's not something physical that you can't touch the Muslim now. It's a symbolic state which prevents you from praying salah. And the hadith of Abu Hurairah radiallahu anh, when the Prophet saw Abu Hurairah and he called him, and Abu Hurairah radiallahu anh, he went away from the Prophet sallam, and he called him again, and Abu Hurairah ignored him and he walked away. And then afterwards the Prophet said to him, what prevented you from answering my call and coming to me? He said, Ya Rasulullah, inni astahaytu kuntu ala janaba. That I felt shy and embarrassed because I was in a state of janaba. So the Prophet said, Innal muslim or innal mu'min la yanjus. The body of a mu'min does not become najas. So even in a state of janaba, you can shake the hand of another person, you can meet another person, etc. No, the niyyah is before. The niyyah is before. But even if a person didn't have a niyyah, the action is still valid. You have to differentiate when you say niyyah. One meaning of niyyah is ikhlas. So when I said that what is your niyyah when you're making ghusl, I meant ikhlas. You're doing it for the sake of Allah, you're seeking His reward. That's from the angle of ikhlas. Then there is a niyyah which you have in your heart before the act of worship. Like before you pray dhuhr, there's a niyyah in your heart, I'm praying dhuhr now. When you're making wudu, there's a niyyah in your heart that I'm making wudu. So those actions require niyyah. However, when it comes to removing najasa, then you don't require a niyyah. Meaning, let's say there was some najasa on your clothes and you put it in the washing machine or you washed it. Do you need a niyyah in your heart like you need a niyyah before wudu? No, you don't. Because the fuqaha, they differentiate between raf'ul hadath wa izalatul najasa. So when it comes to removing yourself from al-hadath, meaning by making wudu, you require niyyah. So if a person did wudu but had no niyyah, then the wudu is not valid. Now, and if you repeat the salah, repeat the wudu which you prayed in that wudu. However, when it comes to izalatun najasa, removing impurities, like impurities from your clothes, you don't need a niyyah. You put your clothes in the washing machine, and then you pray in it. You don't need a niyyah. So they said that when it comes to the washing the body of the deceased, it's like from the angle of removing him from a type of najasa, even though his body is not najas. What I know is that whilst a person is alive, those parts of a body which renew themselves, like blood, for example, then that can be given. In terms of after death and organ donation, I don't know. No, I don't know. I did read the fatwa a long time ago, but I don't recall it now. There's no more questions. جزاكم الله خير. سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك أشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت أستغفرك وأتوب إليك.